Welcome to Career Cafe, where we bring our difference and make our difference. I'm your host, Kaylee. Welcome to Career Cafe. Today we have Rahim joining us. Hi, Rahim. How are you today?
Good, Kelly. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself and a bit about your role in the business?
Sure. So I'm literally in the midst of a career change as we're recording this right now. So up until last week, I led the national operations team at Shoppers Drug Mart, and this week I've transitioned into a new role, which is it's a longer title. It's the VP of Pharmaceutical Sourcing and Commercial Operations, which leads our pharmacy supply chain and quality assurance pillar of the pharmacy network within the enterprise.
Wow. So as a senior leader in the business and as someone who's had grown their career in several different roles, feedback must be something very important to you, both receiving and giving it. What would you say is the most valuable piece of feedback you've received in your career here?
I think it's a bit of a loaded question because I've gotten so much feedback over the years, both positive feedback and constructive. But there was a mentor of mine very early on in my career that gave me some great feedback that I carry with me to this day, which is actually very timely again with my change in role right now, but really challenged me to continue to stretch myself, to challenge me around whenever I felt comfortable, it was time to continue to find new challenges, to grow myself and to put myself into uncomfortable situations and be okay with that in order to grow. And I think that's advice that's held with me for quite some time.
That is really valuable advice. I think that you need to be a little uncomfortable in order to continue growing. Once you're comfortable, it's like, okay, maybe it's time to try something new. So as a leader, you must have given a lot of feedback. So why is giving feedback such an important part of your leadership?
Yeah, I think it comes down to connecting with my team. I think that feedback can really act as a way to steer my team in terms of direction, connection, motivation, engagement. And for us to really stay connected as a group, I think there has to be an open channel of feedback, both constructive again, and also sometimes, to provide areas of opportunity. And I think that provides opportunities for us to refocus ourselves, to anchor ourselves around particular goals that we're trying to achieve and really drive that team performance together. So I find it as a means to drive interpersonal relationships, individual performance, but ultimately to really grow our team as well.
Wonderful. Kind of goes back to that blue culture piece of collaborative candor almost.
Absolutely.
So how do you encourage a feedback culture within your team, knowing how important it is to drive those team strategies and team goals, as well as that interpersonal relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you have to set the example. You have to do it yourself. You have to provide feedback. You have to be open to feedback. I think you also have to be very deliberate and very intentional about the feedback that you give. And it's important that we don't just wait for, times in the calendar throughout the year to provide feedback. Like for me, feedback should be timely. It should be encouraging and supportive. And again, it should anchor around that desire to want to drive forward and be better as an individual, but also as a team. And I think that if that gets embedded in your team culture, you grow all together.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's almost one-on-ones are a good opportunity to kind of plant the seeds of the feedback, and then obviously those big milestone conversation periods like mid-year, end-year feedback probably.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you go into one of those more formalized discussions and there are things that you haven't heard before that are new in those times, I think there's maybe an opportunity there to revisit how often we're providing that feedback. I think that's a great time to sort of bring the themes together, but one-on-ones, sometimes even off the cuff or ad hoc conversations that happen are great times to connect with your team and provide that feedback.
Wonderful. So what advice would you give others on how to give or receive feedback well? Because it's two very different skill sets.
I guess as the receiver of the feedback, maybe I'll start there. I think it's important to stay, open-minded and objective, and it's obviously great and easy to hear, positive feedback. Sometimes when it's more constructive feedback, naturally we all get a bit more defensive. So it's important to just listen. And I think take time to ask clarifying questions. I think it's important that when you're having that conversation, to ask those questions and really understand the feedback that's being given to you. And then what's really important is to take time to digest that feedback and really take time to think it through. And if it requires you to come back to ask more clarifying questions, I think that's okay and it should be welcomed. And then through that process, you can develop your own, call it an action plan, if you will, of how you want to take your next steps and either, redirect yourself or change how you're doing something. But I think that time to reflect and sort of chart your course is really important. And then as the giver of the feedback, I think it's important that you really take time to understand whether it's a situation or the person or the environment before you provide the feedback. And the feedback has to be, I think, very tangible. It has to be very actionable. It has to be very clear. I think connecting it back to specific examples always really helps. And I think that trying to align it as well with the person's individual values also helps, because I think that will help them engage in that feedback and then wanting to, chart that course of action for themselves.
All really great pieces, and I think those are very actionable things people can kind of take away. I do like the idea of taking time to digest feedback before immediately responding or immediately going back. I know we're human. It's hard sometimes to hear that negativity. So I think that's a really good piece of advice that I will definitely take into my own practice when I receive feedback. So you've talked about how you give feedback to help steer the team and help their career growth. So how do you think feedback contributes overall to a stronger team performance?
Yeah, I think it comes down to shared values. And I think that, a great team is made up of different people. And I don't think the intent of any team should be to try and be homogenous in the sense of trying to make everyone, around, the same type of personality. But I do think that there's common values that can be shared. And I think that if we're all anchoring around a certain, group of values and a certain group of goals together, I think it's going to drive that team to want to connect more, to want to support one another, to drive that performance, and really to grow as individuals, but also as a team. So I think it's really just around anchoring around that shared purpose, if you will, for whatever the reason might be. And I guess for me, that's what it comes back down to. And sometimes it comes from the leader, but sometimes it can even come from your own colleagues. There's opportunities where you lift one another up. One person may be feeling down and one person may be feeling up. And then there's opportunities where you really want to celebrate and just give your colleague a pat on the back for something that they've done. And I think that establishing that culture on your team is incredibly vital to growing together.
Amazing. And I know we've touched on this a little bit in our conversation earlier, but what role does feedback play outside of that formal performance review?
Yeah, and I think, again, it goes right back to what we talked about. I don't think we should be waiting until these more formalized calendars of the year to have those feedbacks. I think it should be an ongoing conversation. I think it's important in those conversations to also be able to be vulnerable. And I think by doing that, it's going to allow you to connect with one another better. And that's how you develop really deep and great relationships. And with time, I think it makes that depth of feedback even more important. So, timely feedback is important. I think, again, constructive feedback is important, and just really making it actionable. I think for me, that's always been the biggest piece of feedback. Feedback on feedback, but really trying to make it actionable so that the person can walk away and say, this is really what I want to do to be able to get to where I want to be.
Awesome. And how would you say either giving or receiving feedback has empowered you to bring your difference and make your difference at Loblaw?
That's another big question. I would say, getting feedback has been important for me for many, many years. For me personally, it's driven that intrinsic motivation to want to be a better leader, a better colleague, And you know what? I've even taken some of those skills away and been better, as a dad, as a husband at home as well too. And I think that right now, and sort of going back to the career move I'm making right now, it's forcing me to stretch myself and challenge myself. And so bringing my difference to the enterprise, I think, will allow me, by doing that, to be a stronger leader, to learn more about it, and to give back more to the people that I'm working with.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Rahim. It's been lovely.
So, thanks for the chat. Appreciate it.
Thank you.